Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for June 22nd through 28th. This week I read 2 books, I watched 2 shows, and I listened to 3 audiobooks. First this week we have Roll for Love. This is a dual perspective novel between these 2 girls that live in this very small town somewhere in the Midwest, I want to say. I'm bad with American geography, but like a small country town. Harper is actually just freshly moved here because her grandfather has died and he left the house to her mother, so they've moved into it. And she actually used to spend the summers here quite often up until about 5 years ago when her mother finally divorced her father and realized that she didn't have to escape every summer to go visit her parents, so she actually hadn't seen her grandfather in a very long time. And because she didn't get to go to the funeral, she didn't really get to grieve him either, which is really unfortunate. Our other point of view character is the girl that lives next door and used to basically be her best friend and her first crush back when they were 12, and it turns out the feeling was mutual, but they definitely didn't know it at the time. As we come to find out, Ollie is bisexual, but she is in the closet to basically everyone except for her core friend group because they're pretty much all queer too. And she's finding these reignited feelings about Harper really inconvenient because she just wants to stick to the plan of like eventually find a guy to marry, settle down, have some kids, or at the very least make her career in childminding because that's always what she's wanted to do. But now, ooh, she doesn't know. She might have to act on these feelings, and that could be bad because her family doesn't know and the community doesn't know. One thing that brings Ollie's friend group into being also Harper's friend group is a campaign of D&D where in fact the characters of these 2 people start to fall for each other. But of course they were just saying those things as their characters. Obviously those are the people that have the feelings, right? This book is both a love letter to tabletop RPGs and country queers, and I can highly recommend it. Next we have Sword and Thistle, which is the follow-up to Cursed Cocktails and actually follows a character that we met in Cursed Cocktails, both the bar and the book. In that book we met an adventurer who wandered into the bar one day and is talking about how he often goes off on these quests to find these different things for this supper club that happens that is like very, very secretive and is very full of like rich, powerful people that can pay him a lot to go get whatever they want that time. And in this book we're actually following him as he goes to the latest meeting to find out what somebody wants him to get, and it turns out it's these very specific mushrooms that only grow where dragons have basically decimated the earth. There was this one situation 500 years ago where this very big swath of land was just completely obliterated by a dragon, and he's like, well, I guess I'm going there, even though it said that the souls of like 1,000 dwarves are stuck there because of that massacre, and I'm a little bit scared of that, but I'm gonna go anyway because the payday is huge. Also about 7 or 8 years ago when he and his best friends were doing basically their one big last thing they were going to do together, that didn't go super well and his best friend actually ended up passing, and ever since he's been putting a quarter of his earnings into the bank of the widow of his best friend because he feels so bad, but he also hasn't like visited her because again he feels really bad, even though as we come to find out it was definitely not his fault. Also, of course, Dobbin, our main character, makes some friends along the way, which I very much enjoyed, especially because one of them is a dire pig and she is just such an adorable little cute addition to the tale. I'm not exactly sure how this author manages to pull off these big quests that have like these big scary things attacking them as like still being quite cozy, and yet here we are. As for the shows I watched this week, I'm still continuing with Silent Witness. The last time I talked to you about it, I was in the 11th season and now I'm in the 13th season. And I would like to point out that there was one arc, I think it was the one I actually watched first after doing this video last week, where these 2 people were in a car crash. One of them was a police officer and one of them was this person that she was kind of guarding because she had been let out of jail and people weren't really happy about it because they feel like she didn't get a big enough sentence for her part in a certain thing that happened. And from about 3 minutes into this, and to give you perspective, these are all 2-parter episodes and they're all about 56 minutes long, and you don't actually find out this twist until about 10 minutes to the end of the 2nd episode. I knew what the twist was going to be, so I felt pretty proud of myself. Also, the last couple of episodes I watched, it started out and I was like, this seems a little bit familiar, and then they did one more detail and I was like, oh yeah, they're just taking their inspiration for this case from Kathleen Peterson's murder. I say murder with a question mark because I actually don't know what's going on with that case. I think that it was finally ruled as homicidal violence, although I don't know if somebody was convicted for it or not, because it's been a while since I learned about that case. I learned about that case a couple of years ago. But essentially, in both of those cases, a wife is found at the bottom of the stairs. Her husband calls 911, or 999 when it comes to this show, and it's conflicting whether or not she fell down the stairs because she fell down the stairs, or she fell down the stairs because of some form of violence. This is just something that ends up happening when you watch a lot of true crime content, and then you also watch police procedurals, and you're like, ah, I see which case you're referencing here. We're not referencing so much as you definitely took the inspiration from this case. As for the other show I watched, of course, it was the 3rd episode of the 14th season of Jetlag, which continues to be very amusing. This season they are doing a game of Snake around South Korea on the train system, which is just good times, honestly. It seems really complicated to try to figure out exactly what people are going to do and which battles to put down and which cards to use, but it's really fun for us to watch afterwards. As for the audiobooks I listened to this weekend, like I said at the beginning, it was 3 of them. The first one was Murder Crossed Her Mind, which is the 4th in the Pentecost and Parker series. This is a detective series that takes place in the 1940s in New York, and it's narrated by Willow Jean Parker, who is the right-hand woman to Lillian Pentecost, who is the most famous and best detective in New York. Private detective, that is. She's probably also the best detective, even if you include the police in that. In this case, a lawyer who they've actually faced in court before comes to Lillian and is like, hey, I have this elderly friend and I think she's missing and nobody's taking me seriously, will you track her down? Something interesting about this woman is she remembers absolutely everything, so when he was working with her, she actually worked at a law firm and she'd be present in meetings and she was just basically, the role she had was a secretary, but somebody on the opposing team would quote some form of law as though he knew exactly what he was quoting and he was completely right, and she would lean forward and be like, actually, that's wrong because of this exact quote, and she'd be able to quote the actual book just from memory. But as I talked about, she was retired and she had become somewhat of a shut-in in her apartment, and now she's missing, so now they have to try to find her. This book ends in a way where I was very, very, very happy that I had a hold on the audiobook for the 5th book in the series, which had actually just come in recently as I finished the 4th book, so I was able to dive right into the 5th book, which is Dead in the Frame. Without giving too much away, this one concerns the death of a character we've definitely met before and has actually been threatened by one of our dynamic duos, so that serves a problem. And this case was incredibly complex because our duo had some constraints put on them that are not usual. That is about as much as I can tell you without spoilers, besides we see these other characters that we've met before come in and help out with things, and that was really lovely. And I think this might actually be my favorite historical fiction series I've ever read because I really love the voice of Willow Jean Parker. She's so clever, but then her boss is even more clever, and there's just these interesting people around her all the time, and the person who narrates these audiobooks does such a fantastic job. Everyone gets their own voice and she just acts it so well. The 3rd audiobook I listened to was very, very short, which is how I was able to squeeze it into this week, and that was called Homebody. This is an audiobook adaptation of a graphic novel, which I didn't know when I was meant to pick this up. I just kind of saw the cover on Pagebound and went, that looks really cute, I'll pick that up at some point, and oh look, the library has it. It's only 1 hour long. Interesting. And then I started listening to it, and all the different characters had different voice actors, and there was sound effects, and I was like, oh, I bet this is actually a graphic novel, isn't it? And when I looked it up, I was like, oh yes, when you read it in print form, it is a graphic novel. And I can only assume I would enjoy the art based on the cover, which is really cute. This is an autobiographical graphic novel about Theo growing up and realizing that they're non-binary and what that means to them and what gender means to them. And going through things such as this realization and wanting to tell other people and how that went, as well as trying to figure out a different name and how they are perceived in public. It was cute, it was lovely, and one day I would like to actually look at the graphic novel just to compare a little bit. I imagine it's basically the exact same, except for you're seeing all this with your eyeballs instead of hearing it acted out for you with sound effects. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!